Do you think your bearded dragon's sick? Watch this video and find out. What's up, YouTube? This is probably going to be the last video in the series, the Bearded Dragon Health series. So this one's going to be about illnesses and behavior patterns that you should look for to see if your bearded dragon is sick. So as far as illnesses, I just want to talk about the symptoms and how they can also be something completely different. Just like with humans, we have so many symptoms that could be one thing or another thing. Just a fever could be so many different things. Just a runny nose could be so many different things. And the same thing happens in bearded dragons. One symptom, while most people be like, oh yeah, it's that, it could be so many other different things. So essentially that's what I want to talk about. So first things first is let's talk about some red flags. What should you be looking for in your bearded dragon to determine if your bearded dragon is sick or if there's just something else going on? So a lot of the red flags are going to be just behavioral things, but as well as some things you should be looking for in the body of the bearded dragon, as well as things that happen to that bearded dragon that may lead to other illnesses or an illness. So essentially, the first thing you want to look for is for a black beard. A black beard in a bearded dragon can be completely like so many different things. It can be dominance. So if you have more than one bearded dragon, or maybe they're trying to show dominance to other animals in the house or even yourself, they could be black bearding. The other thing is aggressive all of a sudden. I've had bearded dragons that are not necessarily aggressive, but obviously they are, you know, a little bit headstrong, or maybe they're just food aggressive, but there are times where they don't feel as well as they should, or they're not feeling themselves, and they're even more aggressive. Typically, when you have bearded dragons that are typically not aggressive and they become aggressive, there's a sign, that's a sign that there's something going on. It could be brumation alone could cause a bearded dragon to change behavior just like that, because they're trying to, you know, adjust their body to brumation. So essentially they're trying to let you know, hey, don't mess with me. I'm trying to go to sleep. Leave me alone. So they will get aggressive in those instances. So that's just another example of aggression that may lead to something else. Then you have a lethargic bearded dragon. A lethargic bearded dragon means they're not eating, they're losing weight, they're not moving around a whole lot. That's what lethargic bearded dragons do. And essentially, when you see a lethargic bearded dragon, there's other things you should look for to see if it could be something else, or what else is causing that bearded dragon to become lethargic. Adding on to the lethargic, you also have weight loss. With weight loss, obviously that's pretty self-explanatory. They've lost a whole lot of weight. You usually can see their bones and stuff when there is weight loss. It usually happens really quickly. Bearded dragons are really good at hiding if there's something wrong with them. So you'll see them fine for 2-3 weeks, and then that last week, when they're really rock bottom, is usually when you see all of these things that come out. So you won't even know there's something wrong with your bearded dragon if you're not looking for it. So essentially, you want to be able to catch things the first or second week, and you don't want to ever let it get to that final stage of the bearded dragon is now losing all of its weight. It's lethargic. That usually means there's something really wrong with that bearded dragon. And then the last two red flags that I've noticed over my time owning bearded dragons is typically the same thing, but secretion of the eyes or the mouth or the nose or anything like that. That could be something that's maybe respiratory infection or something like that. And then sometimes I've even had bearded dragons get stuck shed in their eye, and their eyes swell up, and there's a lot of liquids coming out of it, and it almost crust over again. So those are other things you want to look for. Typically, those aren't really the cause of the eye crust. Isn't really a cause of a lot of different things, but it could be something that you should take your dragon to the vet for, because it's not something you can really handle at home. They may prescribe you some kind of like eye drops that are used for like cats and dogs and stuff like that, but essentially you obviously have to get a vet's opinion on what you should do with your bearded dragon. Now let's talk about some illnesses and the symptoms of those illnesses, and essentially what you should look for to determine if your bearded dragon is sick or not. Now, because I mentioned all of these red flags, usually the red flags aren't going to come by themselves. They're usually going to come hand in hand with other symptoms. So essentially, if you see the red flags and you also see the symptoms that I'm going to lay out for the different illnesses, then you should probably take your bearded dragon to the vet. Now, the first one I'm talking about is going to go on with what I mentioned with the secretion and the eye problems. And usually that comes with respiratory infection. Respiratory infections usually come with eye problems or breathing problems, obviously. And typically what you want to look for a respiratory infection is wheezing, coughing, or something that looks like they're inhaling really hard. And I have a bearded dragon right now that has respiratory infection, and she honestly didn't let me know that there was respiratory infection or anything going on with her until the last moment where she started dropping weight really quickly. and now you can kind of see her bones. So I'm showing you this video just for knowledge purposes. So respiratory infections are usually treated by some kind of inhalant. So usually there are things like the nebulizers. People will hook up nebulizers to like a box or a tote or something that you can't, that the liquids and all of that stay in there, the saline solution and all that. The colloidal silver, all of those different things could cause or could help your bearded dragon with a respiratory infection. But essentially, again, make sure you get a vet's opinion on what you need to do. And then the most common thing I see in bearded dragons is MBD, which stands for metabolic bone disease. And this is usually caused by lack of nutrition, so calcium, vitamin D3, even lack of the correct bulb. So if you don't have a UVB bulb, essentially you're going to have problems with your bearded dragons as well. So having UVB bulbs does not mean that you're going to be obviously making everything perfect for your bearded dragon. You also have to have the calcium. You also have to have the vitamin D3. Essentially, you have to have everything that's needed for your bearded dragon. You can't just have one thing. You have to have everything. And also, just because a UVB light is emitting light does not mean that it's actually emitting UVB rays. You should get those replaced every 8 months or so. Some brands do last a little bit longer and they'll take about a year. So essentially you do want to replace them anywhere from 8 to 12 months just to make sure you're always getting the UVB on your bearded dragon that it needs to. Also, just like I mentioned in the lighting video, you want to make sure that the UVB bulb spans at least 2/3 of your bearded dragon enclosure. Some people say half of the bearded dragon enclosure. I personally don't think that's correct. I personally think it should be at least 2/3 of the bearded dragon enclosure, because if your bearded dragon is basking, you want it to be getting UVB. If your bearded dragon is lounging, you want it to be getting UVB. The only time they should not be getting UVB is if they're in their hide sleeping. And essentially, most likely, the lights are probably off as well. But you want them to have a good chance of getting UVB wherever they are in their enclosure, so they don't ever have a chance of not getting UVB. If you think about the wild bearded dragon, the only time they're not getting sun rays is if they're hiding, or actually that's it, if they're hiding. Usually they're burrowing somewhere and you can't get no sun down there, but even in shade, there's still UVB rays. So essentially, you should make sure your dragon is getting UVB in the majority of their enclosure. Now with MBD, what you'll see are going to be what we call jaw swelling. So usually around the jaw, you'll start seeing like little bumps, or maybe you'll see a lump or something like that. And it almost looks like it's cancerous, or it's like a tumor or something like that. It's not the case. Usually those lumps mean that there's something wrong with the bones of your bearded dragon. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you'll get what is squishy bones or rubber jaw or something like that, where essentially you can touch the jaw or any other limb or something like that, and you'll be able to kind of squish in on their bone, which obviously you don't want to do this yourself. You kind of want to at least, I mean, if you do it yourself, you don't want to do it too hard, because obviously you could hurt your bearded dragon, because having the squishy bones or not strong bones because of MBD can obviously lead to breaking the bones a lot easier if you're doing it too hard. Then the last thing you will notice are tremors. Now, tremors could be a lot of different things. Tremors could be MBD. Tremors could be some kind of psychological problem. Tremors could be so many different things. Maybe they fractured their leg or something like that from jumping or running, or maybe they fell off their basking spot weirdly, and they like, I don't know. The tremors could be a lot of different things, but the main times I've ever seen a tremor are usually MBD. The tremors are going to be in their limbs, because again, MBD affects the bone density. So therefore their limbs are not going to be as strong. So they're going to tremor a lot whenever they're walking around. It might not be all the legs. It may only be one of the legs. So you got to look for the tremors in practically everywhere to make sure there's nothing wrong with your bearded dragon. And now we're going to talk about impaction. Impaction is another common thing that happens in bearded dragons. Impaction usually happens when your bearded dragons have ate something that they're not supposed to be eating. So it could be something like sand. If you're a person that likes to keep your bearded dragons on sand, that could cause impaction. Impaction could also be caused by worms that have hard shells, like superworms and mealworms. Those are usually the things that cause impactions. Impaction is something that you'll obviously be able to know, because your dragon's not going to be pooping for an extended period of time. And also, usually what happens with impaction, if it's really bad, it'll look like the whole lower section of the bearded dragon is swollen. Typically, even on the back, the spine right above where the tail is will also look like it's kind of lifted up, and that's because they have a lot of excess poop in that area. So therefore, you got to get that checked out. Typically, what I've noticed with impaction is if your dragon is getting too much fiber and not enough water, that's going to be a problem. So essentially, sometimes most people say your bearded dragon doesn't need standing water, but it doesn't hurt for them to actually drink standing water. It's not like they're going to be dehydrated in that case. They're just kind of, they need the water. If they see the water, they'll drink the water. It was really up to them if they want the water. So I only offer it to them so they can do whatever they want with it. Most of the time they just poop in it, but it is what it is. With Impaction, drinking water is important, and also making sure that if you think your bearded dragon is even slightly impacted, that you put them in a bathtub or a container with warm water, and that'll also help loosen that stool and help them pass it. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we're talking about parasites. And parasites, unlike Impaction, are going to be extremely loose poop. So essentially they're going to be getting diarrhea. And diarrhea with parasites is going to be extremely smelly. You're going to know immediately that it's parasites, because not only is it going to be runny poop, it's going to smell like any other poop that they've ever pooped before, and it's going to stink so bad. So you're probably going to be like, oh my God, what is that stench? It's not going to smell like regular bearded dragon poop. I promise you, it's the nastiest thing ever. Typically, I like to kind of prevent that from happening. I usually do dewormer every 6 months in my bearded dragons, because it's kind of like preventative measures just to make sure that your bearded dragon doesn't get parasites. Now, I will say this, that bearded dragons do have good parasites and bad parasites, just like we have good parasites and bad parasites as well. So essentially, when you're doing dewormer, you're getting rid of all the parasites, good and bad. So you may want to also like give them an electrolyte or a Pedialyte or something like that to make sure that when they're expelling all of that, they're also staying hydrated, and also make sure they're eating good. That way they can get all of their good parasites back as well. So essentially, you want to make sure a lot of these things are done when they have parasites. You want to deworm them if they have parasites. You want to make sure they're staying hydrated, and you want to make sure they're staying fed. Parasites, if a bearded dragon is not eating and it has parasites, parasites will continue to eat the bearded dragon from the inside out. So essentially, they're going to eat everything, all of the nutrients, all of the fat, all of the extra that a bearded dragon has is going to go away because of the parasites. With parasites, you also notice the bearded dragon being lethargic. You also notice weight loss, and that's because, again, the parasites are practically eating all of the nutrients that the bearded dragons has. Now, there's one more red flag that I want to talk about, and that's discoloration. And that's not the same thing as black bearding. Discoloration can be anything that it'll tell you so many different things. It can tell you that the enclosure is too hot. It can tell you that the enclosure is too cold. It can tell you that the bearded dragon is not feeling well. Usually, if a bearded dragon gets dark throughout the entire body, that could be that they're not feeling well. That could be that they're stressed out. That could be that they're trying to absorb heat. So essentially, they're getting darker to absorb that heat. And I know I talked about the red flags early on, but I just want to talk about discoloration now because of the fact that discoloration isn't necessarily going to be for any illnesses. It's just really just a red flag for you to look for. That's just going to tell you about the environment of the bearded dragon. And now to add on top of that is different things that you will see a bearded dragon do that are not necessarily an illness, but just something that's just weird overall. Now, earlier I was talking about wheezing, coughing, and all of that when it comes to respiratory issues. And sometimes when the bearded dragon sheds, it'll get these nostril pieces, and they're going to be almost the last thing to come out on top of their head. Obviously, if your bearded dragon is shedding in the legs, it's not going to have nostril pieces in the nose, obviously. So, but if you have nostril pieces, sometimes it becomes hard for a bearded dragon to breathe through their nose. So essentially, they will breathe through their mouth, and it almost seems like they're wheezing. So if you do have a situation like that where they have that wheezing or that coughing, and they have those nostril pieces, don't be alarmed. It's probably not respiratory issues. It's probably just the shedding. And with discoloration also, if a bearded dragon is shedding, you'll notice that as well because it'll seem faded when it's in shed. And also whenever it's in shed, it'll also seem a little bit stressed out. So maybe you'll see the discoloration as well as some black bearding when they're shedding as well. So, and to add on top of that with the black bearding, some males just end up with black beards all the time. Some males just are just like that. They're just always trying to show their dominance. And they always have a black beard. Now, obviously, sometimes you have extreme black bearding and just a little bit of black bearding. A little bit of black bearding isn't going to hurt nothing. But extreme black bearding could be a huge sign of a problem. I have seen them black beard from the chin all the way to their stomach. And that could happen when they're breeding, but it shouldn't happen just willy-nilly, randomly like that. That's something that it's a huge problem you should probably take your dragon to the vet. And if you made it this far into the video, I really hope you enjoyed it. I really hope you enjoyed the series that I've been doing with the bearded dragon genetics as well as bearded dragon health. I really appreciate everyone that's been watching. Honestly, those videos did really well, and that's essentially what I hoped that it would do. I mean, a lot of people were asking for it, so I kind of hope that if so many people were asking for it, that they would at least benefit from it, as well as want to watch it and share it to other people. And it seems like the videos did really well. So that's really good. So if you made it this far into the video, I do appreciate it. If you made it this far into the series, I do appreciate it. As always, peace. Actually, I forgot the most important part. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything that I put out in the future. Duh.
Artlist.io